There comes a moment on every inner journey when the divine stops feeling distant and begins looking back at you. Section 7. The faces of God is that moment. In these verses, the seeker discovers that divinity is not a single shape or voice, but a living mirror that shifts with every step of awareness. Each face reveals a different aspect of truth, compassion, reflection, perception, silence, and the breath that gives all things their name. This section helps you understand something essential. You do not move toward the divine. Your awareness uncovers the divine already woven into you. As you read these verses, you'll learn to recognize the sacred in your experiences, your fears, your emotions, and even your doubts. The faces of God guide you to see unity in places you never expected, and to understand that the divine is not outside your life, but shining through it. This is where the journey stops being about seeking and becomes about awakening. There are mirrors that show a face, and mirrors that show a soul. But the traveler had never seen a mirror like this, an ancient circle of glass resting in the center of a forgotten hall, its surface rippling like water that remembered light. He approached with caution. The air felt charged, as if 1,000 unseen eyes were waiting. When he looked into the mirror, he did not see himself. He saw versions of himself, a child with unbroken hope, a wanderer carrying grief like a second shadow, a stranger he might yet become, a wiser, gentler self he still did not believe he deserved to be. The mirror shifted again, revealing faces not his own, a mother's tenderness, a rival's anger, a friend's devotion, a stranger's hidden sorrow. Every reflection shimmered with the same quiet truth. Every face is a doorway to the divine. The traveler stepped closer, and the mirror deepened. He understood then. God was not hiding in temples or stars, but in every face he had ever turned away from, including the one he feared within himself. The mirror did not judge him. It simply reflected possibility, the 1,000 ways a soul can learn to love. As he reached out, the glass dissolved into radiant stillness, and he heard a whisper rising from everywhere and nowhere. "See clearly, and you will see me." The hall faded. The light remained. There are masks we choose, masks we inherit, and masks we never realize we're wearing until life forces us to look closely. The traveler found the mask at the edge of a wind-worn shrine, half buried beneath petals that had fallen long before he arrived. It was simple, carved from pale wood and smoothed by time. Its expression was soft, almost unbearably gentle, as if it had spent centuries listening to every sorrow the world whispered into its silence. He lifted it carefully. The mask was warm, a pulse faint, living moved beneath his fingertips. He hesitated. Compassion, he knew, was beautiful, but also heavy. As he held it, the air around him thickened with memories not his own. He heard laughter cracking under the weight of hidden apologies offered too late, broken voices trying to stay whole for the sake of others. He felt the exhaustion of those who cared endlessly, the quiet ache of those who carried pain they would never speak aloud. The mask pulsed again. A voice soft but unwavering rose from within it. Compassion is not weakness. It is the courage to feel deeply without losing yourself. The traveler closed his eyes. He thought of all the times he had turned away from pain, not out of cruelty but out of fear. Fear that if he opened his heart too wide, he would drown in the suffering of the world. Fear that kindness demanded more of him than he had left to give. Fear that empathy was a door with no way back. The mask responded to his thoughts, glowing with quiet light. Suddenly he saw scenes unfolding around him, reflections floating in the air like mirrored fragments of forgotten truths. A child offering the last piece of bread to someone hungrier than she was. A stranger pausing to tie the shoe of a man too old to bend. A woman crying alone in a crowded room because no one noticed her fading smile. A friend giving advice they themselves were desperate to hear. A man pretending to be strong so his family didn't collapse around him. Every reflection carried the same soft radiance, the radiance of compassion, unpolished and painfully human. The traveler felt the weight of it settle into his chest. It wasn't the weight of sorrow, it was the weight of connection. "Is this what you want me to become?" he asked the mask quietly. The mask did not answer with words, it answered with warmth. Compassion wasn't a burden, it was a bridge between hearts, between lives, between worlds that never would have touched if not for someone choosing to care. He slowly brought the mask toward his face, but just before it touched his skin, he stopped. He realized something that stilled him completely. He didn't need to wear the mask, he only needed to understand it. Compassion was not a disguise, it was recognition, the ability to see another's pain without making it your own, to hold someone's story without losing the thread of your own. The traveler placed the mask against his heart instead, and in that moment, the world softened, the wind eased, the sky brightened. Even the silence felt kinder. The mask of compassion dissolved into light, absorbing into him like breath returning home. When he opened his eyes, He felt different, not heavier, but more whole. Because compassion had not asked him to carry the world. It had asked him to see it. There are moments in life when sight alone is not enough. When the world looks familiar, yet everything inside you feels foreign. When you stare into the mirror and realize you're not seeing your reflection, you're seeing the distance between who you were and who you are still becoming. It was on such a day that the traveler walked into the desert of shifting light. The horizons shimmered in ways that made the air itself seem uncertain, as though reality was learning how to breathe again. He had come seeking clarity, yet every step blurred the edges of the world. The sand beneath his feet moved like memory, rising and falling with the weight of unspoken truths. Every grain carried a story he had once ignored, and the wind whispered questions he was not sure he was ready to answer. Hours passed in silence until he reached a place where the dunes parted and revealed a massive stone arch. Carved into its surface were eyes, hundreds, maybe thousands, all looking inward, all looking outward, all seeing something different. He stepped closer. Some eyes looked ancient and tired. Others burned with a curiosity that felt almost childlike. A few reflected his own face, but not the face he carried today, the face of a younger self who once believed the world was simple. At the center of the arch was a single inscription: "You cannot understand the world until you learn to see yourself with more than your eyes." The traveler reached out and touched the stone, and the desert vanished. He stood inside a vast hall, made entirely of mirrors, but none of them reflected him. Instead, each mirror held a memory, a fear, a longing, or a version of himself he had refused to look at. In one mirror, he saw the friend he had failed to comfort. In another, the moment he hid his truth to avoid judgment. In another, still, the version of himself he pretended to be just to feel accepted. Each reflection was honest. Each reflection was painful. Each reflection was necessary. He stepped toward one mirror that shimmered more brightly than the rest. It showed him standing in the present, tired, guarded, uncertain, yet beneath the uncertainty was something unbroken, a quiet, pulsing spark that refused to die. As he watched, the spark grew. Every fear that surrounded it began to soften, as though understanding itself was dissolving the edges of his wounds. Then the mirrors began to change. They no longer showed him isolated versions of himself. They showed him connected ones. How his anger was tied to old hurt, how his compassion was rooted in his own longing to be seen, how his silence had been a shield he built when the world became too sharp. Each mirror revealed a truth he had forgotten. He was not defined by a single moment, or a single mistake, or a single identity. He was the sum of all the eyes within him, the ones that feared, the ones that hoped, the ones that grieved, the ones that believed, the ones that believed. The hall brightened, and the mirrors transformed into a single, vast surface. For the first time, he saw himself whole, not perfect, not broken, but beautifully evolving. A voice rose around him, neither loud nor soft, neither gentle nor stern. It simply was, as if truth itself had learned to speak. True sight is the courage to look inward without turning away. When you can see yourself clearly, you will finally see the world as it truly is. Light flooded the hall, and the traveler found himself back in the desert of shifting air, standing before the arch of watching eyes. But now, the eyes looked different. They felt familiar, as though they were his own. He closed his eyes and breathed deeply. For the first time, he felt seen, not by the world, not by those who misunderstood him, but by the quiet, steady presence within that had always waited for him to return. When he opened his eyes, the desert no longer blurred. The horizon was clear. The path ahead was no longer frightening, because the traveler understood that clarity does not come from the world. It comes from the courage to see yourself with the eyes within your eyes. And with that understanding, he stepped forward, not into certainty, but into truth. There are moments when the loudest truths are heard without a single sound, when the world clamors with advice, opinions, and noise, yet the guidance you need cannot be spoken. When every conversation feels distant and every voice fades into the background, you realize the most important messages come from silence itself. On such a day, the traveler entered a vast forest, where sunlight filtered in scattered patterns across the moss-covered ground. Every step seemed swallowed by shadows, and the air carried a weight of stillness that was both heavy and alive. The traveler had searched the world for clarity, listening for words to guide him, but the forest whispered that understanding might come from a source beyond hearing. He wandered deeper among the towering trees, each one bending slightly as if to share a secret. The wind moved through the branches, rustling leaves, yet no message came in words. He paused, feeling the rhythm of his own heartbeat, the quiet pressure of his breath, and the subtle pulse of life around him. For the first time, he sensed that the answers he sought were not in spoken phrases. They were in perception, in attention, in presence. At the forest's heart, a small clearing appeared, drenched in golden light. A stone altar rose from the earth, carved with no letters, no symbols, only the smooth, quiet weight of presence. The traveler approached and knelt, closing his eyes, letting the silence fill him completely. It was then he began to understand the voice without sound. It was not outside him. It was the inner resonance of truth knowledge, from experience, intuition, and the deep memory of his own soul. The forest, the still air, the warmth of the sun, each became a teacher. Each a wordless lesson in the nature of life and time. The voice without sound reminded him that wisdom often arrives in the spaces between noise. The most profound guidance does not shout, does not demand, and does not explain. It reveals itself in patience, in reflection, in the quiet recognition of what is. Each sigh of wind, each ripple of light, each subtle movement of shadow became a note in a song of understanding he had never known he could hear. As he sat, the traveler realized silence was not emptiness. It was fertile space. A space to reflect, a space to heal, a space to see clearly. Every regret, every fear, every unanswered question was transformed into insight. He understood that the absence of words could carry more meaning than pages of explanation, and that stillness could teach what rushing never could. By embracing the voice without sound, he discovered a new way to listen with mind, heart, and spirit united. He understood that life's essential lessons often bypass conversation entirely. They arrive in quiet moments, in simple awareness, in the patient observation of the world and the self. So traveler rose, carrying the understanding of the silent forest within him. He did not need to speak the lessons aloud. They were already alive inside him, shaping each breath, each thought, each step. The seeker walked alone along a path lined with whispering reeds, each one trembling as if it held secrets too sacred to speak. She paused and drew a deep, deliberate breath. It filled her chest and seemed to pulse with a rhythm older than the wind. Somehow, she felt it, that every inhale was a song, every exhale a prayer. The world around her hushed, the river slowed its voice, and even the sun seemed to hold its light in reverence to the quiet power within her. As she moved forward, she encountered an ancient grove, trees curved and twisted as though they had grown around invisible truths. The leaves shimmered in patterns she could not name, but their motion felt alive, like the pulse of the universe itself. She knelt at the base of a great silver-barked tree, her hands resting on roots that seemed to hum under her touch. Each breath, she whispered to the grove, carries a name of wonder, of sorrow, of hope, a name that calls me to remember who I am and who I might yet become. The air thickened, not heavy, but full of expectancy. She closed her eyes and let the silence teach her. In that stillness, she began to feel the movement of countless lives entwined with her own. Her heartbeat was a drum echoing across the ages, her exhalation a wind that stirred the leaves into song. And then she heard it, not outside, not in the trees, but within herself. A single voice, pure and unshakable, saying, "The divine is not hidden. It is named in every breath, in every quiet act, in every intention that rises from the heart." She breathed again, slower this time, letting the words sink into her marrow. Every inhalation seemed to carry the stories of those who had walked before her, and every exhalation seemed to return them to the world, reimagined, alive, and renewed. Her gaze lifted to the sky, and for the first time, she saw the light as a bridge rather than a barrier. It shimmered with infinite colors, each hue a note in the symphony of being. She realized that every name she had ever whispered to the wind, every prayer she had murmured in the night, was a part of that symphony. The seeker felt tears rise, not from sadness, but from recognition. Recognition that she was part of something larger, something eternal and ever-renewing. The grove seemed to lean closer, its branches cradling her in invisible arms, as if it understood the gravity of her discovery. She inhaled deeply once more, and in that breath, she named the divine. Not in a single word, not in a phrase, but in the entirety of her being. It was a name sung in silence, known by every cell, felt by every nerve, alive in the pulse of her own heart. When she exhaled, the world exhaled with her. The river rippled, the leaves swayed, and the wind carried her understanding across hills and valleys. She understood that the divine was not distant, not unreachable, but present in the simple act of breathing, in naming, in feeling, in being fully awake to the moment. She rose from the roots and continued her path, her steps light but certain. The grove faded behind her, but its lesson remained, that each breath she took was both offering and receiving, both question and answer, and that in every inhale, she could touch the eternal, in every exhale, she could share it with the world. Because the breath that names the divine was not a single moment, but a journey of countless breaths, each one a bridge between the self and the infinite, each one a reminder that presence is sacred, and that every seeker carries the divine within.